It is a great honor and a privilege to introduce Dorris, Mathias, Guttentag. We're here in your beautiful home in Yerushalayim. And Dorris, you are so unique. You were one of the very fortunate to be on the Kindertransport.
Yes.
So could you tell us a bit about where you were born and your family coming from Germany?
I was born in 1929 in Germany in a town called Treisa, which is a very small town. In my time, the Kehillah was very small. There were only 2 or 3 children. It used to be that used to have a Jewish school, and what usually you have from Kehillah. But it had diminished a lot. And in 1939, before the war, my mother arranged for me to go with a Kindertransport to England.
And can you mention a little bit about your parents and your grandparents?
My parents, first of all, my father was a big believer in Germany. He didn't think that anything would happen to the Jews in Germany, in contrast to his sister, who in 1928 said Germany is not good for the Jews, and she went to America. But my father believed in the Germans, and he got on well with it. He was what you call Eisenhandler. Don't know what you call it now, but he sold anything from a nail to a tractor. And he traveled a lot all around the area and mixed with Gen. And in fact, on the 8th of November 1938, in the morning around lunchtime, the whole crowd of Nazis stood in front of our house with stones in their hands, but they didn't do anything. And one shouted out, "Oh, leave him alone, he's a good Jew." But
was your father ever in the military? In the army, in the German army?
Yes, he was in the German army, and he lost an eye in the army, and he was, after Kristallnacht, they arrested all the men. The 10th of November they came, 7 o'clock in the morning, took my father away, and he was in Buchenwald. And he was released because he fought in the First World War.
We have a picture of your parents, a very beautiful picture. What year was this picture taken of your parents?
1926.
And Dorris, can I ask, it was your family, you were brought up in a frum Orthodox family?
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
And was there a shul in the town?
There was a shul in Treisa.
There was a mikveh?
Yeah, there was a mikveh. The mikveh is still there, it seems. The shul was destroyed and they've built a house instead. You saw the mikveh, huh?
And your grandparents, were they born in Germany as well?
Yeah.
So it's quite a few generations.
Yes. They came to live with us in 1937. But my father's brother, who lived with his parents, decided, they lived in a smaller place, there were only 3 Jewish families left. And there was a lot of anti-Semitism. The windows were broken.
So here you have a picture of your grandmother.
Yeah.
And what do you remember about your grandmother?
They came to live with us. My grandfather was very weak, and he was blind. He couldn't see very well. My father used to carry him up and down the stairs every day. And my grandmother, she was okay. She looked after him, and he died in November 1938.
And growing up, did you mainly mix with Jewish children, or
There were 2 Jewish children and 3 Jewish children. One was a boy. He eventually went to a boarding school in Frankfurt. He suffered a lot from antisemitism. I never suffered any anti-Semitism in Germany.
Did you have a lot of German friends, school friends?
I had one German friend, next door neighbor, and she came when the children went to Germany. She insisted on coming.
Amazing. She was there in 91, I think.
And this is a picture of your. Do you remember her name?
We don't know her name. Her name was Trump, but we don't know her name.
Martha Corell.
Oh, you got it. You made it. Her name. You didn't know her name, or?
And here's a picture of you with your parents on a horse.
Yeah.
And here's your mum. And growing up, did you have very pleasant memories of growing up in the town? And
No, not really. I never suffered anything.
But you had pleasant memories.
Yeah.
And the school you went to, was it a government school?
Until it came to when Hitler started in 1933. When my mother's mother was staying with us for a while, and we were looking out an upstairs window, and the Hitler Youth marched through the streets. And my grandmother said if only she wouldn't have to live through this. And 3 days later she died. And but that's the only sort of thing that I felt until 38.
And did you go to a government school?
Yes.
And
I had to go to school on Shabbos, but I didn't have to write.
And you never felt any anti-Semitism?
No, not until 38.
So we have a wonderful picture of your first day at school. This is really, really amazing, and you got a very special gift. If you could. Who sent this gift to you? This was sent from Germany recently.
Yeah.
And it's
Because I gave the children who went to Germany then, I gave them a photo of that. And so the teachers bought this.
Shimon asked if it's still good.
Huh?
Shimon asked if it's still good.
And you remember your first day at school?
Not really.
Yeah.
Tell them about your last day in school.
The what?
What happened at the last day in school?
When they sent you home.
They sent me out the last day in school, the 9th of November, 38. I was sent home from school. I was told that the rest of the lesson isn't for me. And I went home, and we used to share a newspaper with 2 elderly ladies. My mother sent me to take the newspaper to them. And while I was there, my mother came to fetch me. So I said, "Why has she come?" She didn't say anything. And we went through back streets. We didn't go through the main road. And I kept asking, "Why are we walking here?" But she wouldn't say anything. And then when I got home, there was the Nazi standing in front of our house.
And what do you remember of Kristallnacht?
Of what?
Of the Kristallnacht. What do you...
Kristallnacht. They said they woke up. We didn't go to bed. And we put 3 sets of clothing on in case we'd have to run away.
But you could feel the atmosphere.
Yeah, that was the atmosphere. 11 o'clock in the evening, we had our next door neighbors, this lady lived next door to us. One of the doors, there's a very narrow passageway between our 2 houses, and we both had windows facing. And there was a knock on our window, one of their daughters, and she said her father's just come home from the pub and they've called off the 12 o'clock strike. So she says, you can go to bed. But we went to bed eventually, but we didn't sleep. And then at 7 o'clock in the morning, they knocked at the door, and the police was there, or the Nazis, I don't know who it was, took my father away. And they were told to bring lunch at 12 o'clock to the station. So the men were all there, and they were told to come back and pick the dishes up at 2 o'clock. And I went, and the men weren't there. They asked, where are they? They didn't know. And a few days later, my mother and another lady went to the local Gestapo to find out where they are. But I don't think anybody knew anything, locally anyway. But living opposite us, there was a Nazi. And he sat in this window most of the day. We had to be careful. These neighbors that we had a bakery, and we used to get our bread from them. My mother used to bake the challahs in the oven. And they were very good, and then also they knocked on the door and said, if we need anything, their daughters will get it for us.
And I think here you have a wonderful picture of several Goisha families continued their friendship. They knocked on the back door and offered to do shopping and help with anything the family needed. And you can see how close the apartments were.
Yeah.
And also,
There's a doll there
they were
now.
threatened as well. Tell them they were threatened.
Hmm?
Tell them they were threatened, the neighbours. That's the alleyway. My mother said the gate wasn't there when she lived there, but that's between the two houses.
Here's the alleyway. And do you remember when the shul was destroyed? It was destroyed on Crystal Night?
No, the next morning the Sefer Torah were rolled up. The shul was right at the bottom of the street. So the Sefer Torah were all rolled up. And I don't know when they burnt the shul down. That must have been through the night, I don't know.
But you were only about 8 years old at this time.
Yeah.
It must have been terrifying.
Yeah. From then on, life was terrifying.
And Dorris, did you have any siblings?
No.
You were the only child? So your parents must have been very protective of you, very. And were you scared to walk in the streets? I'm sure you must have been very...
Yeah. Didn't go out very much. Life wasn't easy anymore. And also my father had a shop in the house. And one day they told us to stay in the room, and they emptied the shop out.
They just came in and looted. So how did your family make a living? How did they?
I don't know. I mean, we had money in the bank, I suppose, and we had a comfortable life. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. And my father still tried to get in touch with people who owed him money and what. Some people were helpful and some people weren't. And he had a terrific car accident. He used to ride a motorbike. This was years ago, long before that. And he had an accident with a car. And the witnesses who saw it, they said it was deliberate.
And when your father was arrested, and then he was with the Jewish men, they sent him away to Buchenwald.
Yeah.
And how long was he there for?
He was for about a month.
But you didn't know where he had gone, or?
No. I don't know, I think a few times my mother went. The wife was always my mother together with somebody else. They went to Kassel to the Gestapo to find out what was happening, and I don't know what. And my grandfather was sniffed at the end of November 38. There were no men in town, so she wouldn't know what to do. And first she got in touch with the local authorities and what, and they said first they agreed to a burial and then said no. And it was yes and no, backwards and forwards. And also my mother tried to get my father to come back, at least for the Levaya. Also was backwards and forwards, yes and no. And in the end, it was no. And he was buried in Kassel. I don't know anything about how it happened or what. How she managed it all, I don't know. I don't remember anything. And I know that he knew that he was buried in Kassel.
And then your father came back?
My father came back. One gentleman came back before him. He had the papers on him that he'd fought in the First World War. And he told my mother and all the other women whose husbands were in the First World War. And my mother again had to go to the Gestapo and present the papers. And a week later my father came home. And it was just before the end of the Shloshim, so he still said Shiva.
It must have been very emotional for you and your mother to see your father. Yeah.
He came home, I think, in the middle of the night. And when I woke up in the morning, he was bald. He had shaved his hair off.
And Doris, during this time, you weren't allowed to go to school?
No. So the last day I went in school was November 38.
So did you read, or did your mother teach you a little bit?
Yeah, my father tried to teach me a little bit, yeah.
And the German school friends, did they ever come to visit you or to?
No, they couldn't. This one, I mean, the only one I was really friendly with was this neighbor. And she said that she saw me leave and she wanted to say goodbye to me, but she didn't have the courage to. She knew that she wasn't allowed to. So, and when they put these stoppelstones out, they wrote about it in the local newspaper. And the sister of this lady saw it, and she recognized the name. And she was born in 38, she was only a baby. So she didn't know us, but they said that their parents always talked about us.
Fondly, I'm sure, very fondly. Wow.
After the war, I wrote to them to ask if maybe my parents left something with them, but they said no, it was too obvious, they were being watched.
Sure, it's unbelievable. And can I just ask, so your father came back and it was just now, and when did your parents decide to send you on the Kindertransport?
I'm not sure when it was, but first my mother tried to, in Holland, this cousin of hers, who, the stepmother of this person, she lived in Holland. So my mother contacted her, Malaysia, that they can come to Holland. And she agreed. And then afterwards she wrote, children aren't allowed to go to private homes anymore. So, and have to go to a hostel, and she wouldn't advise it. One of the girls from Trysa, who I was friendly with, she went to Holland. What happened to her, I don't know. So after Holland fell through, so that's when my mother got in touch with her sister in England. And this gentleman agreed to take me in.
So could you just describe, I know it's difficult, but what happened when your family finally your parents made the decision that you're going to go to England?
Well, it couldn't have been easy for them.
The most difficult decision?
My father took me to the train to the Kindertransport. My mother didn't come to the station.
And when you said goodbye to your mother,
Yeah.
that must have been one of the hardest moments of your life.
I didn't realize, I thought, I'd meet them again. Although when the war was declared, on the 1st of September 1939, I said, I'll never see my parents again. And that's what happened.
So what date did your father take you to?
On the 15th of May, 1938. And I arrived in England on the 18th of May.
In 39? 39. And he took you to the train station, and then the train went to Holland?
I went to Holland. We went by boat overnight.
And were you with your father when you went to Holland? Or
No.
He just took you to the train?
We went from Hanover, I think, Germany. The transport left from Hanover in Germany. That's when we had to say goodbye to our parents.
Did you know anybody on the train?
No.
You must have been very scared. You were only 9 years old.
I remember when everybody was talking whom they're going to and what's happening. And I said that I'm going to an aunt. I was the envy of the people on the train, because they didn't know who they were going to.
They didn't have any family.
They were picked up by strangers.
And that train journey, did you recognize anybody from your town or from?
I don't know whether there were any other people on the train, and I don't know how many carriages there were.
Had you ever been on a train before?
Yes. Yes, we used to go to visit my grandparents.
And when you said goodbye to your father, it also must have been, you never knew that you weren't going to see him again.
I never thought that I'd never see them again.
But it must have been also very emotional to say goodbye.
Yeah, of course. And I suppose it was worse for my parents.
And in Hanover, how long were you there for?
Where?
In Hanover.
No, I don't remember. I think we went straight to this train. You had to be there at a certain time, I suppose.
And then the boat, do you remember going on the boat?
Yes, I remember getting on the boat, and I remember feeling sick all night.
And the people who took you on the boat, those who were helping, were they very caring?
Yeah. On the train, also the Gestapo kept walking through, but they never did anything or said anything. Nobody molested us on the train.
Had you ever been on a boat before?
No.
So it must have been a little bit of an adventure. But were you scared and petrified?
Yeah. Wow. Know what was happening.
And how long were you on the boat for?
That was overnight.
It wasn't a long journey.
It wasn't a long journey, no. I can't remember the times. But we arrived in Harwich in England, and then we went on a train to London. And in London we went into a big hall. And we got biscuits and something to drink. And then eventually they started calling out children's names.
And you never knew English?
And you know English? Nothing.
And who came to fetch you at the train station?
My aunt, Auntie Fanny, together with one of the girls. And she was looking after. I mean, I didn't know them.
Had you ever met Auntie Fanny before?
And yes, and she used to have to come while she was in England. She used to have to come every year back to Germany, something to do with a passport. She had a German passport. And she used to stay with us.
You never married?
Hmm?
You never married?
She never married?
No. I remember she came to our mother's vomit.
And was she very very caring and very loving?
Yeah.
So here is a picture with you and your Auntie Fanny. And the person that you, if you could just speak a little bit about the home that you were when you came to England in Golders Green.
It was an apartment. I mean, I'd never been in an apartment, but we used to live in a house. And this was in the downstairs 4-room apartment. I shared a room together with the 2 other girls.
Okay, so who were the 2 other girls, if you could?
The 2 other girls, they were called Ruth and Marion Kugelman. And my aunt Auntie Fanny was looking after them.
So, Dorris, can you just mention why they came to be with your Aunt Fanny? A bit of a background?
Because their parents had died, and an uncle of their father's brother had promised to look after them if anything happened to him. So he did, but he didn't know what to do with them. He was by himself a bachelor. And he remembered that in Germany, in Berlin, where they lived, a cousin of their stepmothers used to visit quite often. So he got in touch with her and asked whether she'd come to look after the girls until he found a different solution. Well, they never found a different solution. Things just stayed like that until he got married in 1947.
And
that was before the 44, I think he got married.
So when you arrived, the 2 girls were there already?
Yeah.
And what were their names?
Marion and Ruth Kugelman.
And what ages were they?
They were, Ruth was 2 years older than me, and Marion was another 2 years older than us, so she was 11.
She just passed away now, about 2 months ago.
Marion just passed away.
And did you develop a very close friendship?
Yeah. I mean, we called ourselves cousins. This was the simplest thing, but we were like sisters.
And there was no favoritism showed, or
no.
So having the two sisters must have been a big help to integrate.
Yeah, of course. They'd lived in England already for 1936, I think they came to England.
And did they help you learn English, or did they help you?
Lots of people tried to help me with English, and it didn't work. And at the beginning of the war, schools weren't ready to open. They didn't have shelters yet. So the teachers used to come to the house. It took a few, 4 or 5 children in the same area. And I had a teacher who was very good, very sympathetic. And from her I learned English. She was not Jewish. There were no Jewish schools then.
And the family that you were, it was also from and
Yeah.
And did you go to the shul?
Yes.
Which kahila did you go to?
It's called Monks' Shul.
The original monks?
Yeah.
They got married, my parents got married.
There was a German Kahila. Monks.
Yeah.
And during the war years, did you go to school eventually, or?
Yes. I can't remember how long it was before school opened, but there was school, yes. And there was in London during the Blitz, there were air raid sirens every night and bombings. And one morning I was going to school and the children were coming back. I said, "Where are you going?" "There's no school. It's been bombed, all the windows are out." So again, we didn't have school for about a week or so, then they repaired it and we went back.
And Doris, during this time, the only way that you could communicate with your parents was by sending them letters.
Yeah.
So could you speak a little bit about...
you could write twice a week. And in November 42, my mother wrote, "They're going away, they won't be able to write." So I didn't know what was happening, where they were or what. And I can't remember when it was, but I got a letter from a gentleman who comes from the same town as we did. He was in Switzerland, and he wrote, but my parents are in Theresienstadt, and that my mother's working in the kitchen so they don't go hungry. He was there as well, and the Germans wanted something from the Swiss, I think trucks or something, I can't remember what. But the Swiss wanted something in return, so they released a few people from the concentration camps.
And was he one of them that was released?
He was one of those who was, so that's all I knew until after the war.
I think your father made a minion in Theresienstadt as well.
Yeah, after the war I got a letter from a lady. My mother used to give my address in England to anybody whom she thought would be able to get in touch with me. And this lady wrote that my father organized minyanim in 44 for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but for Sukkot they weren't there anymore. And October 44 they were sent to Auschwitz.
And you have a picture of some of the letters that you did with the Red Cross. And this one was from July 1942 and from August 1942. How often did you used to send and receive letters from your parents?
Twice a month.
So you must have looked so forward to getting these letters.
Yeah.
It was the only and there were no telephones, you couldn't...
No, you could, even if you had telephones, you couldn't get in touch.
And Doris, when did you hear the news that your parents were taken to Auschwitz? It was after the war.
After the war, yes. There was a final big Kindertransport reunion. It was in 1999, after 60 years. And there was a gentleman there from one of the associations. And he said that they've got the dates of what happened to my parents when. And he sent them to me, and that said that in October 44 they were sent to Auschwitz. And Yad Vashem has got the same information.
So it was the final...
I got this information, but I haven't got it anymore. I don't know what happened to it.
But it's at Yad Vashem, and it's... And can I just ask, the family that you stayed with in Golders Green, It was it was just amalgamation. It was sort of,
Yeah.
but you all got on. You all got on well.
Yes.
My father used to call him his Schwer. That's how close
That's
he
very special people, because
Very.
not everybody did this.
No, of
In
course
fact,
not.
many didn't do
Yes, I was lucky.
He was a wonderful.
Extremely lucky, because there's so
I mean,
many.
this gentleman, I didn't know him, he didn't know me.
And they were. I'm assuming, but they weren't.
I called him uncle.
I'm sure they weren't very wealthy. He was also an immigrant.
Yeah.
He was wealthy. And over the years, but
What?
he was wealthy.
Yeah.
No, but
Afterwards,
but not in the
during
beginning.
the war, life was difficult. I mean, he wasn't wealthy.
Yeah, during.
He tried to establish himself. Huh?
He was the annual.
Knew, and I said, you knew him, yes.
And they left, his wife left my mother in Russia, and that's how close they were.
Can I ask, in these pictures of your early years, who is in the picture with you at the bottom? In this picture?
That's me, and that's Ruth Kugelman.
One of the girls.
And you remained close all the years?
What?
You had a close connection all the years?
Yeah, with Marion. Ruth died already a few years ago. Ruth didn't have much connection with Marion. I did, yeah.
I remember his school there, I was in Liverpool. I used to live in Liverpool near Manchester.
And Dorris, can I ask, from the remainder of your family, those that had came to well, it was Mandate, Palestine, Israel, did you have a connection with other uncles and aunts?
Yeah, yes. After I was married in 1950, we came to live here. We went to a kibbutz. And I met all my aunts and uncle, my uncle. I mean, I knew them from before, but I hadn't seen them since, for 15 years or something like that. When I saw me, I said, "What's happened to your blonde curls?" I'd gone brown in the meantime.
And then you went back to England?
Yes, and then we were here for 6 years, and then we went back to England.
And you were living in Gateshead?
Gateshead, yeah.
And through the years, did you have any communication with other Kindertransport children?
There used to be reunions. I mean, there were a few people whom eventually got to know that they were on the Kindertransport. Some people you knew and didn't know they were on the Kindertransport, found that out later. When we came back here in 1972, and not long after, there was a reunion here. It was in the Ramada Hotel. We lived opposite. The last evening there was dinner, and we also didn't know anybody. My husband met somebody whom he was in yeshiva with, and he didn't know anybody either, so we decided to sit together at the table. Then somebody called some of the other people the Tzita. The name Tzita don't hear very often. And I look at her and say, "Are you Tzita?" I can't remember what her surname was. She said, "Yes." I was on Hashara with her years before. And I look at the other people and says, "You're Ruth Richmond, and you're Sefer Delba," yeah? So all people whom I knew. I never met this dinner, the reunion of Kindertransport.
And the family that took you in, you kept a very close connection all the years.
Yeah, yeah.
That's really wonderful.
Yes, I mean, he was, until the last minute, he was very concerned. I mean, once I started working and I earned money, and I thought I started buying my own clothes. He wasn't got annoyed with me.
And did they have their own children?
Yes, I have two children. Yes, I have two children.
And you were close with their children as well?
Yeah, I keep in touch with one of them.
It's wonderful.
Very much so. Very much so.
And then something very special happened. The town that you grew up in Germany, they wanted to make the special stones, and they invited your family to come.
Yeah.
So could you speak a little bit about when you got the invitation?
My grandson got an invitation.
He got an email one day from somebody who was doing a project in the town, the school was doing a project against anti-Semitism and Gizamut. And he got in touch. He had a relation to my mum. And he arranged all this trip.
I never heard anymore. He asked me, do I mind if he goes? No, if he wants to go. Never heard any more about it.
He's the oldest grandson. He was in Manchester today. He did all the
Then one day, my son phoned and he says, we're going to Germany. I said, who's we? He's going and all his sons and 2 daughters and a couple of daughters-in-law and a couple of grandchildren. I said, how's this come about? Well, this Shlomo Meir, he mentioned it to 1 or 2 of his brothers. He thought maybe 2 or 3 of them will go. Well, he talked to 1 or 2, and they talked to another 1 or 2, and that was 8. There was my son phone told me that it was 18 people were going. And from then, it snowballed. When the Hannah phones, she and her sons want to go. My daughter from America phoned, got a surprise for you. Her daughter is booked to go. And that's the way it went on.
28.
And you didn't want to go?
I didn't want to go. I couldn't have done it anyway. I couldn't have walked around all day.
But can I ask, in all the years, did you ever go back to Germany?
No.
You wouldn't go back?
I wouldn't go back. I don't know, I thought if I go back, I'd be looking behind me all the time. I thought that I wouldn't feel safe going back. I mean, my relations, the ones that came to live here, they all went back on visits to Germany. Quite regularly.
And the German, you have a book, Dorris, if you could just show us the book of the German children in the class, they wrote a book. If you could show, it's a very special project that the school children did. A Tagebuch.
Tagebuch, diary.
A diary of Dorris. And were you very touched when you read what they had written?
What?
How did you feel when you read what the school children had written in the book?
I don't know. It's written very peculiarly. It doesn't reflect on me. They wrote what they thought I would feel and what I would be saying under the circumstances.
But it's a nice project that they did. And in the town, they did. These are the. I think they asked your permission if you would want to have it done.
They did it without permission.
They did it without permission.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my mother said no.
They've done it all over Europe. Different countries they've done it.
You didn't want to do it in the beginning?
No.
How come?
What?
Why not?
What?
That you were against doing this?
Because I thought, what you hear of what goes on in Germany, the anti-Semitism, it would be destroyed.
But in a way, it's done the opposite.
Yeah, so it seems.
So here they have. This is a copy of.
With that time, you can hardly see, because the whole street's cobbled. They don't stand out at all. It looks amazing, but when you actually see it, it's very small. You can just pass it or not see it. But having been there, I want you to know that project looked very authentic. You think of students 15, 16, what do they really care or know about? But they seem very, very authentic in their project. And they made a very good impression. They translate it, they said in German, they translate it into English for us.
And here we have the kever of your.
My grandfather. That is, they couldn't find it.
That was amazing.
And where did they find it eventually?
It's not in Kassel. They can't find it. There's a lady, an 80-year-old lady, and she knows all the quorum.
A Yiddish lady?
Yes. And there's no such kever. My grandson already said to his father, said, let's forget it, it's not there. But my son says, no, I'm positive that it's in Kassel. Other things that I wanted to know I wasn't always sure about. Said, but I'm positive about that. But my uncle from America used to go every 2 years after the war to Germany to visit Keberovus. And he went to Kassel. And my daughter from America, she came in the last minute. They left the day after Schwuz to go, so she had to go to Europe before Schwuz. Because of the time difference, she wouldn't have managed. And she was staying at my son in Gateshead. And talked about this, that they can't find the kibbutz. So she said, she's got a photo of it. My uncle gave her a photo, I never knew that. But she didn't remember where it was. When they were on the way from Gateshead to the airport in Manchester, in the middle of the night, she phoned America and told her son to have a look in the drawer in the living room, and he found it. So she phoned my grandson and said, she's got it. He phoned a person in Germany who was arranging him. He's not Jewish, but he looks after the Korim. And he says, well, send it to him. And he did, and a few minutes later he phones back, he's found it. Once he knew what it looked like.
Because it was the other way, they were saying it was the other way up. It wasn't standing up.
Also it was
covered with moss.
It was covered with mud and sand.
Didn't look like the picture.
And you can only read half the name now.
And they found also this is the town and the mikveh, and the mikveh it's still there today.
Yeah. I don't know, they can't stop it or something like that.
Yeah, the water.
And are there any Yidden that have gone back to the town?
What?
Are there any Yidden living in the town? Any Jews?
No. I love the town. You know, Germany, Bechlali, Mashimon, beautiful country. Well looked after.
So I just want to ask you, Dorris, what is your impression of the Kindertransport? If people ask you, they say over 10,000 Jewish children were saved, but unfortunately some went to non-Jewish families and don't even know that they're Jewish.
Yeah, I mean everybody was very grateful to the British. But there was a Nishai meeting and I had a quiz. And one of the questions was, do you stand up and play God Save the Queen? So somebody says, no, why should I? There's another one who would come from Germany said, yes, she does, because for the sake of them, she's here.
And Dorris, if I can ask you, during all this time, when you heard that your parents unfortunately were taken to Auschwitz, your emunah, did you always retain your emunah? Did you always have a deep belief in Hashem?
Yeah.
It didn't diminish, or it didn't?
No, I mean, from what one heard, at the beginning of the war, the family wouldn't let me read the newspaper. But then one day from school we had a project, I don't know, you had to read something in the paper and report on it and something was, so from then on I read the paper and I mean, you knew what was going on. And when I had this, I mean, from the day the war was declared, I said I won't see my parents again.
You felt it?
Yeah.
And did you always feel you wanted to remain from?
Yeah.
It was never a shayla that you...
No.
I think this is what your family instilled in you. They instilled...
That's all I knew, and that's how I grew up.
And what message do you impart to your grandchildren and the future generations?
I don't know. What do I impart on you?
Well, to look forward. You always say look forward, don't look back.
That's what my mother said to me on the way. Before I went the day before I went to the train, I went with my mother to Casa to buy clothes, and she gave me a diary, and she wrote in it, "Look forwards, never back." That would be our life. It was in German, and that, and then she wrote, "Es ende nie unser Glück," and it'll never stop our luck.
Do you remember your father's last words, what he said to you? Do you remember what your father said to you? Any of the last
No,
words?
I don't remember.
And I think it's always to look forward. It's a very, very positive message.
Yeah, yeah.
And having brought up a family and seeing children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, it must give you a lot of
Yeah, I mean,
a lot of nachas.
it's unbelievable. It's
And I just want to ask you, Dorris, that decision that your parents made to send you is possibly the hardest decision a parent could ever make.
yeah, yes. And that's what they stressed on this last reunion for the Kindertransport. It was much harder for the parents than for the children. And some of the children were so young that you didn't realize what was happening.
And you were never upset with your parents for sending you, because there were some children that resented that their parents sent them,
Yeah.
because they didn't know they were.
Yeah.
You were grateful. Looking back, you were grateful. They made
Yeah.
a sacrifice. They made the ultimate
they made
sacrifice.
the sacrifice, of course.
The ultimate sacrifice.
Yeah.
And that saved your life and future generations. Baruch Hashem.
Yeah. There's over 100 of them.
Baruch Hashem and Hashem. Kenya, I just want to thank you. So I just want to thank you. I just want to thank you so much, and it's been the greatest honor and privilege to be with you, and just wishing you.
How did you find out about me in the first place?
Through Mishpacha, it's a great grandchild. So I just want to thank you, Shulani of Nachas and Mazla and Brocha, Admei Vesrim, in good health and all of Hashem's blessings.
Amen.
And thank you so much.